Guys, if you're still using lines like "I'm just busy" or "I need space" as your go-to explanations, you're not just losing the girl, you're instantly failing the Sigma woman. These aren't harmless excuses, they're red flags. To a Sigma woman, those lines don't sound mysterious or complicated. They sound like avoidance, wrapped in weak honesty. Today, we're breaking down the 9 excuses men use that immediately disqualify them in the eyes of a Sigma woman. No drama, just truth. Take a breath for a second. This isn't about attacking men, and it's not about being harsh. Sigma women don't expect perfection. They expect clarity. They value directness, self-awareness, and emotional adulthood. So when excuses show up instead of honesty, interest disappears fast. Let's talk about why. One thing to understand first. Sigma women don't argue with excuses. They observe them. Excuses tell them everything they need to know about readiness, priority, and emotional capacity. Now let's look at the ones that fail instantly. 1. "I'm just really busy right now" is one of the fastest ways to lose a Sigma woman's interest, and not because she lacks understanding. Sigma women understand responsibility. They manage their own lives, their own schedules, their own pressure. They don't expect constant attention or unrealistic availability. What they expect is honesty. When a man uses busy as an explanation, a Sigma woman doesn't hear time constraints. She hears prioritization. She knows that people make time for what matters to them. Not endless time, not dramatic effort, but intentional presence, a message, a plan, a follow-through. Being busy has never stopped someone who's interested from showing up in small, consistent ways. Sigma women live this reality themselves. They balance work, independence, and personal space without disappearing on people they care about. So when busy becomes a pattern instead of a moment, it reads as disinterest dressed in politeness. Sigma women don't argue with that. They don't demand more attention. They simply adjust their level of investment. Attraction doesn't survive uncertainty for them. Busy also signals emotional avoidance when it's vague. If someone can't explain what they need or how long they'll be unavailable, it feels dismissive. Sigma women respect space when it's communicated clearly, but "I'm busy" with no context feels like being placed on hold indefinitely. And they don't wait in emotional limbo. They have full lives. They don't pause them for someone who can't be direct. This excuse also reveals a deeper mismatch. Sigma women value self-leadership. They're attracted to people who can manage their time and communicate their capacity honestly. When busy becomes a default response, it signals a lack of emotional maturity. Not because life isn't demanding, but because clarity is missing. A Sigma woman doesn't need daily reassurance. She needs reliability. She needs to feel chosen, not squeezed in. Busy, without effort, tells her she's optional, and she doesn't attach herself where she's optional. She doesn't take it personally. She doesn't internalize it as rejection. She simply reads the information and moves on. Interest for her isn't fueled by chasing. It's fueled by mutual intention. If someone is genuinely busy but interested, it shows differently. They communicate proactively. They set expectations. They check in. They make space when they can. That kind of effort is felt immediately. Sigma women respond to that. But when busy is used as a shield to avoid emotional responsibility, it shuts things down fast. She won't confront it aggressively. She won't ask for explanations. She'll quietly disengage. Conversations slow. Availability shifts. The spark fades. Not because she's cold, but because she's clear. To her, attraction doesn't require convenience. It requires intention. And when intention isn't present, she doesn't wait around hoping it will appear. She chooses herself instead. 2. "I need space" instantly changes the way a Sigma woman sees a man, and it's not because she doesn't respect boundaries. She does. Deeply. Sigma women value independence and personal space more than most. They don't cling. They don't crowd. They don't expect emotional fusion. So the issue is never the need for space itself. The issue is how it's used. When a man says, "I need space" without clarity, context, or responsibility, A Sigma woman hears avoidance, not self-awareness. Space, when healthy, is specific. It has intention behind it. It sounds like, I'm overwhelmed right now and need a few days to reset, but I want to continue this conversation after. That kind of honesty builds trust. But vague space feels like emotional disappearance, and Sigma women don't invest in people who disappear instead of communicate. To her, I need space without explanation feels like being pushed to the edge of someone's life without consent. It places her in uncertainty, and uncertainty is where attraction dies for her. She doesn't panic or protest. She doesn't demand reassurance. She simply notes that she's no longer standing on solid ground. Sigma women require emotional clarity to stay engaged. They don't need constant closeness, but they do need to understand where they stand. Space that creates confusion feels destabilizing, not respectful. It signals that the man doesn't have the tools to manage his emotions while staying connected. That's a red flag. Not because emotions are bad, but because avoidance is. Sigma women are drawn to emotional adulthood. Someone who can say, I'm struggling, but I'm still here. Someone who can ask for space without severing connection. When I need space becomes a shutdown instead of a boundary, it tells her that future challenges will be handled the same way, with withdrawal instead of dialogue. She's already lived that pattern. She knows how it ends. It ends with her doing emotional work alone, so she doesn't stay. Another reason this excuse fails is because Sigma women don't chase people who pull away. Distance doesn't trigger pursuit in her. It triggers detachment. When someone asks for space, she gives it fully. No checking in, no hovering, no waiting. And often, that space becomes permanent. Not out of punishment, but because her interest dissolves in the absence of connection. Attraction for her requires presence. Not constant presence, but conscious presence. When someone steps back without anchoring the connection, it floats away. Sigma women don't anchor things for other people. They don't hold the emotional rope alone. If someone lets go, she doesn't grab tighter. She releases. I need space also tells her something about timing. It suggests the man isn't emotionally available enough to build something steady right now. And she doesn't try to be patient for potential. She respects reality. If someone can't stay engaged during discomfort, she knows deeper intimacy will be unsafe later. So she exits early, quietly, calmly, without drama. To a Sigma woman, space isn't the problem. Avoidance is. And when the two are confused, attraction fails instantly. Quick pause. If you've ever heard one of these excuses and felt your interest disappear instantly, hit like. It helps this reach women who need to hear it. All right, let's keep going. 3. I'm bad at texting sounds harmless on the surface, but to a Sigma woman, it immediately signals misalignment. Not because she expects constant communication, and not because she's obsessed with phones. Sigma women don't need good morning texts or endless back and forth. What they care about is intentional effort, and this excuse quietly admits that effort is selective. A Sigma woman understands patterns. She knows people communicate well when they want to, maybe not frequently, maybe not perfectly, but clearly. When someone says they're bad at texting, she doesn't hear a skill issue. She hears a willingness issue. Communication isn't about talent. It's about priority. You don't have to be eloquent. You don't have to respond instantly. You just have to show up with consistency. Sigma women do this themselves. They manage full lives, responsibilities and independence, yet they don't disappear on people they value. So when I'm bad at texting becomes an explanation for delayed replies, missed check-ins or vague responses, she registers it as emotional laziness, not malicious, just uninvested. This excuse also removes accountability. It turns a choice into a trait. Instead of saying, I'm not great at staying connected, but I'll work on it, the statement becomes final. This is just how I am. Sigma women don't argue with that. They accept it and move accordingly. They don't negotiate for basic communication. They don't train someone to show interest. They don't remind adults how to stay in touch. When communication feels like a burden to someone, attraction drops fast. Because communication is the bridge that keeps connection alive. Without it, intimacy fades. Another reason this excuse fails is because Sigma women don't chase availability. When replies are inconsistent, they don't fill the silence. They don't double text. They don't perform patience. They pull back. Not to punish, but to protect their energy. Interest doesn't grow in confusion for them. It withers. Bad at texting also suggests a deeper issue. It implies avoidance of emotional presence. Texting isn't just logistics. It's acknowledgement. It's saying, I see you, I remember you, I'm still here. When someone avoids that, it feels like being kept at arm's length. Sigma women don't invest where presence feels optional. They don't demand more than someone can give. They simply notice what's being offered and decide if it's enough. And often it's not. This is why the excuse fails instantly. Not because texting matters so much, but because intention does. If someone wanted to connect, they would find a way that fits them. A short message, a voice note, a planned call. Effort adapts. Disinterest hides behind excuses. Sigma women don't confront this with frustration. They respond with clarity. They stop leaning in. They stop initiating. They stop imagining depth where consistency is missing. And once they do that, chemistry fades quickly. To a Sigma woman, communication isn't about quantity. It's about reliability. When someone can't offer that, she doesn't wait around hoping it will improve. She moves on quietly, knowing that real interest never needs to explain itself. 4. I don't like labels sounds thoughtful to some people, but to a Sigma woman, it signals emotional hesitation disguised as philosophy. She doesn't hear depth or openness. She hears avoidance of responsibility. Sigma women aren't obsessed with titles. They don't need public declarations or rigid definitions to feel secure. What they do need is clarity. And this excuse removes clarity while pretending to offer freedom. A Sigma woman understands that labels don't create pressure. Ambiguity does. When someone refuses to name what they're building, it keeps everything suspended. Nothing can grow properly in that space. To her, I don't like labels usually means I want the benefits of closeness without the accountability of commitment. And that imbalance is a deal breaker. Sigma women are highly self-led. They know exactly what they're offering emotionally. They don't move blindly into intimacy. So when a man avoids naming the connection, it feels like he's keeping one foot out the door. That doesn't make her try harder. It makes her disengage. She doesn't want to be in a dynamic where she has to guess her role or minimize her expectations to keep someone comfortable. Another reason this excuse fails is because Sigma women don't confuse freedom with lack of intention. They value autonomy deeply, but they also value decisiveness. Someone can be independent and still clear. Someone can move slowly and still be honest. Refusing labels isn't about pace. It's about reluctance. And reluctance kills attraction for her. She doesn't want to invest energy in something that won't stand still long enough to be named. This excuse also shifts emotional labor onto her. Without labels, she's left to interpret behavior, read between lines, and manage uncertainty. Sigma women don't take on that work. They've learned that unclear dynamics slowly erode self-respect. So instead of negotiating or pushing for definition, she steps back. She allows the lack of clarity to speak for itself. And what it says is enough. I don't like labels also suggests fear of expectations. Sigma women don't impose unrealistic demands, but they do expect mutual effort and honesty. When someone avoids labels, it often means they're not ready to meet those expectations. She respects that, but respect doesn't mean staying. It means leaving cleanly. She doesn't wait around hoping the other person will change their mind. She doesn't stay in undefined spaces trying to prove her value. She understands that if someone wanted to define the connection, they would. When clarity matters, people find the words. The absence of those words is information, and Sigma women trust information over potential. Attraction for her isn't fueled by uncertainty. It's fueled by groundedness. When a man avoids labels, he creates instability, and instability shuts down desire. She may still enjoy the person, but the deeper pull fades. Interest becomes neutral. Emotional investment slows, because she doesn't attach herself to what refuses to be named. To a Sigma woman, labels aren't about control, they're about honesty. And when honesty is missing, attraction doesn't fight to stay alive. It simply lets go. 5. I've been hurt before sounds vulnerable on the surface, but to a Sigma woman it immediately raises a quiet boundary, not because she lacks empathy. In fact, she has plenty of it. She understands pain. She's lived through her own. What makes this excuse fail is how it's used. When past hurt is presented as a reason not to show up fully in the present, a Sigma woman hears emotional avoidance, not honesty. She doesn't dismiss trauma. She respects it. But she also knows the difference between acknowledging pain and hiding behind it. When a man leads with, "I've been hurt before," to justify distance, inconsistency, or emotional unavailability, it signals that he hasn't taken responsibility for his healing, and she will not step into that role for him. Sigma women don't see emotional wounds as disqualifying. They see unprocessed wounds as risky. They've learned that unresolved pain doesn't stay contained. It leaks into communication, trust, and intimacy. It shows up as withdrawal, defensiveness, or mixed signals. So when someone uses past hurt as a shield instead of context, her attraction begins to cool. She's not interested in being the exception that proves someone can love again. She's not auditioning to earn emotional access. She believes healing is a personal responsibility. Another reason this excuse fails is because it subtly asks her to lower her expectations. It implies that she should be patient with less effort, less clarity, less presence. Sigma women don't accept conditional connection. They don't believe their needs should shrink to accommodate someone else's unresolved pain. They can be compassionate without compromising themselves. When a man hasn't done the inner work to show up safely, she doesn't try to inspire him to change. She steps back. She knows how this pattern plays out. She's seen how empathy can turn into emotional labor if boundaries aren't clear. "I've been hurt before" also places the emotional burden on her to be careful, understanding, and forgiving in advance. Sigma women don't take on that burden. They don't walk on eggshells to protect someone else's unhealed wounds. They want a partner who can communicate pain without making it her responsibility to manage it. Someone who can say, "I've been hurt, and I've done the work to show up better now." That difference matters. Without it, attraction doesn't deepen. It stalls. She may listen, she may understand, but she won't invest, because she knows empathy without accountability leads to imbalance, and imbalance drains her. Sigma women value emotional adulthood. They're not afraid of vulnerability. They're wary of people who use vulnerability to excuse stagnation. When a man leans on past pain to avoid commitment, clarity, or effort, she doesn't argue. She doesn't shame him. She simply recognizes that he's not ready, and readiness matters more to her than potential. Attraction for her isn't built on sympathy. It's built on mutual capacity. When that capacity is missing, chemistry fades quietly. She doesn't feel heartbroken. She feels informed. To a Sigma woman, past hurt explains behavior, but it doesn't excuse it. And when someone hasn't moved beyond their pain enough to show up fully, she doesn't wait around hoping love will heal them. She chooses herself and walks away. Let me ask you something. Have you noticed how once clarity is gone, attraction never really comes back? If that's been your experience, drop the excuse that ended it for you in the comments. Now, the next one matters. 6. "I'm just going with the flow" sounds relaxed and easy, but to a Sigma woman, it immediately signals a lack of direction. She doesn't hear calm confidence. She hears avoidance of intention. Sigma women aren't rigid or controlling. They don't need everything planned or defined right away. But they do need to feel that someone knows what they're doing with their own life and emotions. When a man hides behind the flow, it feels like drifting, not presence. And drifting kills attraction for her. Going with the flow often means letting circumstances decide instead of making conscious choices. Sigma women don't live that way. They are self-led. They know what they want, what they don't want, and what they're open to exploring. So when a man claims he's just flowing, it tells her he hasn't reflected deeply enough to have direction. That doesn't make him wrong. It makes him incompatible. Chemistry for her is tied to intentional energy. She's drawn to people who move with purpose, even if that purpose is still forming. Flow without direction feels passive. It places emotional labor on her to carry momentum, clarity, and movement. And she won't do that. This excuse also avoids accountability. If something doesn't work out, it can be blamed on the flow. If effort drops, it's just how things went. If clarity never arrives, that's part of the journey. Sigma women don't accept that framing. They believe people choose how they show up, even when they're unsure. They don't see confusion as romantic. They see it as unresolved. When someone can't articulate what they're open to building, attraction loses its footing. She doesn't feel grounded. She feels like she's standing next to someone who could float away at any moment. Another reason this excuse fails is because it often masks fear. Fear of commitment, fear of disappointment, fear of responsibility. Sigma women are intuitive enough to feel that. They don't shame it, but they don't stay in it either. They want a partner who can say, "I don't have everything figured out, but I'm choosing to show up." That choice matters. Flow without choice feels like waiting, and Sigma women don't wait in emotional limbo. They move on. This excuse also dulls polarity. Attraction thrives on decisiveness, on someone taking a stand, even a soft one. Going with the flow removes that edge. It makes everything feel optional, and when everything is optional, nothing feels chosen. Sigma women want to feel chosen, not incidental. When a man can't articulate his intentions, she doesn't push for answers. She listens to what's not being said. She notices how the connection feels unsupported. Slowly her interest fades, not in anger, in clarity. She doesn't need certainty about the future. She needs certainty about the present, and going with the flow offers neither. To a Sigma woman, flow is something you enter together after intention is established. Without that foundation, flow is just avoidance with a softer name. And avoidance never holds her attention for long. 7. That's just how I am is one of the fastest ways to shut down a Sigma woman's interest because it signals emotional stagnation wrapped in finality. When she hears this, she doesn't hear confidence or self-acceptance. She hears refusal to grow. Sigma women respect individuality. They don't try to change people. They don't mold partners into someone else. But they also don't invest in people who treat their limitations as fixed identities. This phrase tells her that the conversation is over before it really began. It says, "This is the ceiling, don't ask for more." And Sigma women don't build connections under ceilings. They understand that everyone has patterns, habits, and flaws. What matters to them is self-awareness. Growth doesn't mean becoming perfect. It means being willing to reflect, adjust, and take responsibility. That's just how I am removes that willingness. It turns behavior into destiny. If communication is poor, that's just how he is. If effort is inconsistent, that's just how he is. If emotional availability is limited, that's just how he is. Sigma women don't argue with that. They accept it as truth and disengage, because truth without growth is not attractive to them. This excuse also shifts the burden onto her. It implies that if she has a problem, she's the one who needs to adapt. She's the one who needs to lower expectations. Sigma women don't do that. They don't negotiate their needs down to fit someone else's comfort. They don't silence themselves to keep peace. They believe compatibility includes the ability to grow together. When someone shuts that door, attraction has nowhere to go. Another reason this excuse fails is because Sigma women are deeply self-reflective themselves. They are constantly checking their own patterns, questioning their reactions, and refining how they show up. They don't expect others to be perfect, but they do expect them to be conscious. "That's just how I am" sounds unconscious. It sounds like avoidance of introspection, and avoidance repels her. She knows what it's like to outgrow someone who refuses to look inward. She's lived that dynamic. She's felt the exhaustion of carrying awareness alone. She won't repeat it. This phrase also signals emotional rigidity. It suggests that future conflicts will be handled the same way. No discussion, no curiosity, no flexibility. Sigma women value adaptability, not chaos, but responsiveness. They want to know that if something isn't working, it can be addressed. When someone declares themselves unchangeable, it feels unsafe. Not dramatic unsafe, stagnant unsafe. Attraction needs movement, growth, a sense that things can evolve. Without that, desire dries up. Sigma women don't confront this excuse aggressively. They don't try to prove why it's problematic. They don't argue for change. They simply take the information and step back. They understand that people show you who they are when they tell you who they won't be. And when a man defines himself by his limitations, she believes him. She doesn't wait around hoping experience will soften him. She doesn't stay to see if love will change him. She knows better. To her, "That's just how I am," isn't honesty. It's a warning. And she listens. 8. I didn't think it mattered instantly shifts how a Sigma woman sees a man because it reveals a lack of emotional awareness rather than a simple mistake. Sigma women don't expect mind reading. They don't expect perfection. What they do expect is attentiveness. When something matters to her and a man dismisses it as insignificant, it tells her he isn't paying attention to impact, and impact matters more to her than intention. This excuse minimizes her experience without directly saying it doesn't count. It places the focus on his perspective while quietly erasing hers. Sigma women are highly attuned to emotional nuance. They notice effort. They notice care. They notice when someone remembers what's important to them and when they don't. So when a man says he didn't think something mattered, she hears that he wasn't considering her inner world at all. That doesn't make him cruel. It makes him disconnected. And disconnection kills attraction for her. This excuse also avoids responsibility. Instead of acknowledging oversight or asking why it mattered, it closes the conversation. It suggests that her reaction is an overreaction. Sigma women don't argue against that framing. They simply disengage. They don't want to be in a dynamic where they have to justify why something matters to them. Emotional maturity means understanding that importance is subjective. If it matters to the person you care about, it matters. Full stop. When a man doesn't grasp that, she sees a future filled with small dismissals, forgotten details, unmet needs, moments where she feels unseen. She's lived that before. She knows how draining it is, so she doesn't stay long enough for resentment to form. Another reason this excuse fails is because Sigma women value intention backed by awareness. They aren't impressed by apologies that don't include understanding. Saying, "I didn't think it mattered," often comes without curiosity. There's no follow-up, no "tell me why it mattered to you." That absence tells her he's more interested in defending himself than understanding her. Attraction for her is tied to emotional intelligence. She's drawn to people who can pause and consider another perspective, even when it's inconvenient. When that capacity is missing, desire fades. This excuse also signals a pattern. If he didn't think this mattered, what else will he overlook? Boundaries, preferences, emotional signals. Sigma women don't wait to find out. They read the early signs. They trust them. They don't escalate or dramatize. They simply lower their investment. Conversations feel flatter. Interest softens. The connection loses depth. Not because she's punishing him, but because her nervous system no longer feels engaged. She doesn't feel met. And without being met, attraction doesn't grow. Sigma women don't need grand gestures. They need presence. They need someone who notices and cares enough to ask. When a man dismisses something that mattered to her, even unintentionally, it tells her she'll be carrying the emotional awareness alone. She won't do that. She's already learned what that costs. So she steps back, quietly, calmly, with clarity. To a Sigma woman, "I didn't think it mattered," isn't a small mistake. It's a signal, and she listens to signals more than words. Before we get to the last excuse, make sure you're subscribed. This channel isn't about chasing or fixing anyone. It's about clarity, self-respect, and quiet strength. Okay, last one. 9. You're overthinking it is the fastest way to shut down a Sigma woman completely, because it attacks her perception instead of addressing the situation. To her, this isn't reassurance, it's dismissal. Sigma women trust their awareness. They've spent years learning how to read patterns, energy shifts, and emotional undercurrents. Their thinking isn't random or anxious, it's informed. So when a man says she's overthinking, she doesn't hear comfort. She hears that her reality is inconvenient. This phrase minimizes her experience while protecting his comfort. It reframes her intuition as a flaw instead of engaging with what she's noticing. Sigma women don't argue with that framing. They withdraw, because attraction cannot survive where perception is invalidated. This excuse also reveals a lack of emotional accountability. Instead of asking why something feels off to her, it shuts the door on conversation. It says the problem isn't the situation, it's her mind. Sigma women don't stay in dynamics where they have to defend their clarity. They don't explain themselves repeatedly just to be taken seriously. They know the difference between spiraling and noticing. When they speak up, it's usually after reflection, not impulse. So being told they're overthinking feels insulting, not calming. It signals that future concerns will be handled the same way, with dismissal instead of dialogue. That's a deal breaker. Another reason this excuse fails is because Sigma women value mutual respect over emotional comfort. They would rather hear an uncomfortable truth than a dismissive reassurance. Your overthinking avoids responsibility. It keeps the man from examining his actions, his inconsistency, or his lack of clarity. Sigma women see through that immediately. They don't feel the need to convince him otherwise. They simply stop engaging. Once a woman's intuition is dismissed, trust erodes quickly, and without trust, attraction disappears. This phrase also creates emotional distance. It tells her that her inner world isn't welcome, that her observations are inconvenient. Sigma women don't shrink themselves to maintain connection. They don't soften their awareness to be more palatable. If someone can't handle her clarity, she doesn't dim it. She leaves, not dramatically, not angrily, just decisively. Your overthinking also implies superiority. It positions him as rational and her as emotional. Sigma women reject that dynamic immediately. They know their mind is one of their strengths. They don't tolerate being talked down to. Attraction for them is tied to being met intellectually and emotionally. When someone dismisses their thinking, the spark shuts off. Completely. There's no curiosity left, no desire to explain further, no interest in continuing the exchange. She doesn't need validation, but she does need respect. And this phrase removes it. To a Sigma woman, being told she's overthinking isn't a misunderstanding. It's a boundary violation. It tells her that staying will require self-doubt. And she won't choose that. She trusts herself too much. So she disengages. Quietly. Permanently. And once that happens, there's no recovery. Because attraction doesn't come back after disrespect. It doesn't need to be loud to be final. So here's what I found. Sigma women don't reject men for being imperfect. Imperfection doesn't scare them. They know everyone is learning, healing, and growing in their own way. What ends interest for them isn't flaws. It's fog. It's vagueness. It's the absence of clear intention. Sigma women are deeply intuitive, but they don't rely on intuition alone. They pay attention to behavior, communication, and follow-through. When a man is unclear, when his words soften responsibility or dodge truth, attraction fades fast. Not because she's harsh, but because she's precise. Excuses feel small to her, not in a judgmental way, but in an informational way. An excuse tells her someone knows what's expected and is choosing not to meet it. That matters. It tells her how future moments will be handled. With deflection instead of ownership, with explanations instead of effort. Sigma women value self-responsibility because they live it themselves. They manage their emotions. They reflect on their actions. They don't hide behind circumstances to justify inconsistency. So when a man offers excuses instead of clarity, it creates an imbalance she won't step into. She doesn't chase explanations because she knows explanations don't change patterns. She watches behavior. She listens to what's repeated. If effort is missing, she doesn't negotiate for it. She doesn't argue her way into being prioritized. She doesn't convince someone to show up. That kind of pursuit feels beneath her self-respect, and she doesn't stay where honesty feels optional, where truth is softened to avoid discomfort, where clarity is replaced with convenient phrases. She's learned that those spaces drain her, slowly, quietly, completely. When excuses replace clarity, interest shuts down without drama. There's no confrontation, no long speeches, no emotional outburst, just a calm withdrawal. She stops leaning in. She stops imagining depth. She stops making room. It's not anger that closes the door. It's certainty. Certainty that staying would require her to accept less than what she offers. Sigma women don't see this as rejection. They see it as alignment. They're not trying to punish anyone. They're simply honoring their own standards. Standards that weren't created to exclude, but to protect. Protect their energy, their time, their emotional integrity. They know how expensive it is to stay in unclear dynamics. They've paid that price before. They won't pay it again. If you've ever heard one of these excuses and felt your interest disappear instantly, trust that feeling. It wasn't cold. It wasn't dramatic. It was informed. Tell me which one did it for you. Your insight might help another Sigma woman stop questioning herself and start trusting her awareness. And when you're ready, watch the next video on your screen. More truth, more clarity, more strength without noise. A space where discernment isn't labeled as being difficult, where boundaries are understood, where depth is respected. Trust me, you'll feel understood.